welcome to the Climate Problem Solvers. My name is Becca.
My name is Lee, and we're gonna talk about the vulnerability and opportunity of climate change, history of Colombia, UNFCCC and Kyoto, recommendation, and finally conclusion.
Our first reporter is coming to you live from the countryside.
I'm coming live from the countryside right now. As you can see, the Colombia countryside isn't very good right now. So after a few months of research in Colombia, I found some vulnerabilities that are caused by climate change, but also some opportunities that can be helped by climate change. So here, let me show you my research right now. One of the 5 vulnerabilities I'll be talking about today is sea level rise. It is caused by the melting of glaciers and warming of oceans. It threatens the health of Colombians living on the coast of Colombia. If we do not continue to make improvements to health climate, food production will be negatively impacted. The Colombians' health will be at higher risk of getting infections and vector-borne diseases. Another vulnerability is extreme weather. It causes a lot of disasters and negative impacts to occur in Colombia. It kills thousands of livestock and destroys crops. And it also makes Colombia lose a lot of wetland resources and land resources. Yields are also declining, price instability, agriculture and livestock losses are all caused by extreme weather. People's living environment and life will also be threatened by this. One climate change vulnerability is floods. It causes contamination and ecosystem degradation in water supply. Natural flood control is a water supply for Colombia's largest cities and is currently failing because of the increased amount of flood. Many deaths have been reported from unsafe water because of the less fresh water from the mountains. There's also a higher vulnerability to forest fires and droughts. Crops failures and infrastructure collapse due to fresh water availability. Increased temperature is another vulnerability in Colombia. It affects their cloud forests, agricultural land, and human health. It heavily affects their coffee production in Colombia. From 2006 to 2010, the amount of products produced went down from 12 million to 9 million, which would affect their economy in a negative way. This also affects humans as they are more vulnerable to dehydration and kidney stone. The last climate change vulnerability is heavy rainfall. This is 11 months of non-stop rain, causing the rivers to top their banks, affecting and destroying cattle ranches and croplands. This will further deteriorate the living conditions and increase the amount of displaced Colombians in the country. Nearly 7% of Colombia's populations have been displaced due to this. And Colombia's economy can also lose up to annually 1.2 billion per year until the year 2100. Sea level rise can not only be seen as a vulnerability, but also an opportunity. This is caused by glaciers melting and warming oceans. This can lead to more precipitation, which helps release droughts and forest fires in the country. We can use this to develop tidal energy, which can help replace fossil fuel and water shipping. Since sea level rising is directly impacting the environment around Colombia, this can help attract people to want to study climate change and try and help study negative impacts of global climate change. Flooding can be seen as a vulnerability, but also an opportunity. It can provide a lot of water resources for the country. They can use the water resources as hydroelectric power. This can be the main way to generate energy. Hydroelectric power from the flood can help the economy in a positive way, as it can bring 6,000 direct jobs and 24,000 indirect jobs. This can also help reduce the consumption of fossil fuels and reduction in carbon emissions. Droughts creates water and freshwater shortages, but this is also an opportunity for people to come together and develop a friendly alternative source of water retrieval. Since this is a direct issue to people, this can help create awareness to help stop climate change and take action individually. This can also help their economy as they can develop a forest carbon project which takes money and pays owners that want to conserve land for forest restoration. This can also help conserve parks and stop degradation of planet. The last opportunity is heavy rainfall. While this may seem as a negative impact to Colombians, this can also create an opportunity for people to move from rural areas to major cities. More than 3 million people have moved from rural areas to major cities. Since the population in major cities will increase, this can create an opportunity for people moving to find a better job. The process of urbanization is accelerating, and this will attract poor people to want to seek a safer place to live in. Since more people will want to move from rural areas, the government will be forced to pay more attention and provide improvements in the rural areas. One of the opportunities I'll be talking about today is increased temperature. Increased temperature causes longer dry seasons, but this is actually a good thing since dry season is the most popular time for tourists to visit. The home country that will be impacted by this, but the lowlands of the country will benefit from this the most. People will get to learn about Colombia's culture and possibly end up living in Colombia. Colombia's economy will also benefit from this since people end up spending more money to buy souvenirs and have chance to visit more places.
Thanks, Dennis. Let's see the history of Colombia from my partner Becca's research.
Before colonization, Colombia was reliant on cheap native labor and was used to provide manufactured goods to Spain. They were a large exporter of agricultural goods as well. Eventually, they gained independence from the Spaniards, and after colonization, they established their economy with their mining industry, agriculture, and cattle raising. All of these exports in cattle through the years contributed to climate change, which eventually led to where they are today, experiencing a record high in natural disasters, which greatly affect their economy in itself. Because of their steam engine and diesel engine uses after the Industrial Revolution, Colombia increased their greenhouse gas emissions. Currently, in the past decade, Colombia's carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel consumptions have increased by around 40%. There's a demand for energy, and their emissions are expected to increase in the upcoming years. Although Colombia has contributed to fossil fuel burning, they only produce less than 0.4% of the world's greenhouse gases, which is substantially less than other countries. Here is a graph from the total CO2 emissions from fossil fuels from 1921 to 2011. And here are the CO2 emissions from Colombia from 1968 to 2008. Notice how they are significantly lower than the average country. Deforestation is a huge issue in Colombia. They cut down forests for ranching and agriculture before and after they gained independence because paper is a large export from Colombia. Cocoa from cocoa bushes are also a large export, which contributes to deforestation as well. Deforestation is still a large problem in Colombia, and they have been working greatly to cut down on it. Here's a graph of the forest loss in Colombia. As you can see, it is on a large scale and peaked in 2007, but they have been making efforts to try and cut down on it. Colombia overall has a low carbon footprint. The urban population, most of their carbon footprint can be attributed to transportation, manufacturing, construction, and using solid fuels. The rural population carbon footprint can be attributed to agriculture, waste, and using solid fuels as well. They don't really have a lot of capacity to adapt to climate change impacts because they're also dealing with poverty, which increases that population's vulnerability. Whereas the urban population are more able to adapt to climate change because they make more money. Some of the vulnerable populations in Colombia include women, indigenous people, poor people, and unborn babies. Because of the extreme weather in Colombia due to climate change, some women face food insecurity and energy shortages, which makes it hard to provide for their families. Indigenous people also face the consequences of extreme weathers. It affects their tradition and living environments, which forces them to leave and risk the loss of knowledge and cultural practices. Poor people also face the impacts of climate change. With all of the heavy rainfalls and floods, it is common for them to lose their housing and become homeless, so they have to leave their living area. Because of events like floods and heavy rainfall, it increases waterborne diseases which affect unborn babies and their health. Ways that Colombia can adapt to help the vulnerable populations are: for women, they can find an agriculture product which is more resistant to drought conditions and find another product which is more resistant to floods, so women will not have to face food and water insecurity. For indigenous peoples, policymakers and authorities can make protocols of protecting their culture and traditional identities. For poor people, the government needs to find out the best balance of urbanization and the improvement of living conditions so poor people can have a place to stay when they lose their homes. For unborn babies, the government should invest in public health to monitor the health conditions of pregnant women and their unborn babies so their healthy baby stays healthy. With every change comes a trade-off. With increasing the amount of forest land to reduce deforestation, they might run out of space to build more houses for people to live in. Because more flooding occurs, the water transportation can be of use. The energy used for water transportation requires more burning of fossil fuels, which is not good for the environment. Because people are seeking a higher quality of life, more people move into urban cities, which in result, government will feel more pressure to create more lands fit for those people, and will be spending more money to solve those issues. And they want to build a hydroelectric power station to increase the amount of water from sea level rise, but the station will cost Colombia more money.
Thanks for the research, Becca. What is government going to do to stop the current climate change trend?
That's an excellent question, Lee. We actually have a Colombian representative at Paris right now.
I come live from Paris conference.
Colombia's economy is highly dependent on the outside world due to the limit of its geography and long-time civil conflicts. On the one hand, tobacco and coffee are the leading agriculture exports. The exploration and export of natural resources helped develop the economy for Colombia. On the other hand, agriculture in Colombia now are heavily affected by climate change, and the human exploration worsens the climate change. In 2010, Colombia produces less than 0.4% of greenhouse gases in the world. Even though Colombia is not the main emitters, they are still trying to help save the earth. To address this problem, Colombia adopted the UNFCCC in 1994 and ratified for acceptance to the Kyoto in 2001 and approved the Kyoto in 2005. Colombia signed onto the Paris Agreement in 2015, but has not been ratified for acceptance. The Republic of Colombia submitted their climate action proposal plan to the UNFCCC in September of 2015. Colombia is the first national communication to the UNFCCC, and it was very active in the UNFCCC REDD Plus negotiations. It actively participated in all the decision-making discussion in UNFCCC. Colombia also provided advices and funding when needed. According to UNFCCC, Colombia seeks to get foreign aid from developed countries and invest more money on new energy development. It also encourages education that makes vulnerable population find better job opportunities. Colombia seeks to reduce greenhouse gas emission with 20% before 2030. The reason why Colombia adopted the UNFCCC, Kyoto, and Paris Agreement is that Colombia are highly affected by the climate change. Most of the population live in the Andes, but in this area, the water shortages and land instability has worsened because of climate change. In the coastal area, the increase of the sea level and floods caused by climate change have strongly affected the economic activity of Colombia. There are more evidence that Colombia is one of the most vulnerable countries that affected by climate change. There are 5 major instances of Colombia's involvement. The first one is Colombia CDM project. This project is working on reforesting and protecting forest biodiversity and the clean water available for people. The second one is Colombia's future focus and outsourcing plan. Colombia will contribute their efforts to the global targets, which include the increasing resilience like Convention on Biological Diversity. Also, Colombia will develop, transfer the technology and the construction of capacity at every different government levels. The third one is Colombia proposed amendments to the Kyoto. Colombia hoped that under the Kyoto, Annex 1 parties can be more considered. Also, Colombia want to make sure that Annex 1 countries are not emitting carbon dioxide amount more than they are assigned. Parties in the Annex 1 will individually determine the quantified emission reduction commitments. The last one is Colombia's Climate Action Plan. In 2015, Colombia was the first South American country to release its new Climate Action Plan to the UNFCCC. In this plan, they state how they are committed to decreasing deforestation by a huge amount, reducing fossil fuel emission, and improving the well-being of the entire population. The last one is Amazon Vision Program. Colombia commits to achieve zero net deforestation by 2020. In order to reach this goal, Colombia started Amazon Vision Program, where they address challenges and research practices to help decrease deforestation. Since the colonial time and where Colombia is located, it's a developing country that's more relies on the agriculture and export. Because Colombia's agriculture is so affected by the results of climate change, they are trying to conserve natural resources and cut down the emission of fossil fuel. Colombia is a developing country that without a lot of resources or financial aid. So through the help of involvement in the UNFCCC, Kyoto, Paris Agreement, and other country organizations, they are able to actively be a part in dealing with the climate change and making a difference. These reasons are why Colombia adopted the UNFCCC in 1994, joined and got ratified in Kyoto in 2001, and continued with Paris in 2015. These are also why Colombia was active in dealing with climate change and presenting ideas like the CDM project, Colombia's adaptation action to Paris, proposals to Kyoto, Climate Action Plan during UNFCCC, and Amazon Vision Program after they signed onto the Paris Agreement.
Has been working hard to stop climate change. Here are some of our political platforms. Mention what we have done in the past. Do you have further recommendations?
Yes, we still have some recommendations for the Colombia climate change. Colombia should outsourcing their resource in a diplomacy way. A good diplomacy can give country positive outsourcing result, so Colombia can have the resources to mitigate and adapt their climate change. Colombia needs to popularize more documents about UNFCCC, Kyoto, and Paris agreements to educate its citizens the importance of improving climate change. Also, Colombia should introduce more climate action plans to society in order to raise the conscience of protecting environment. We would suggest the Colombia government to provide living policy and human health care plans to their citizens. Governments can learn from another country to see how another country did on the living and human health. Encourage another countries in similar lower financial situation to take climate change as seriously as they do. Colombia should set the precedent of them by taking actions by seeking partial funding more developed country from the renewable resources. The Colombia government can develop according to its own national conditions to provide living policy and human health care plans to their citizens will cause the government to have to use the limited amount of money they have on something more important like human health care plans. In order to upgrade another countries of our plan and progress, we will have to spend some money to spend them upgrades and reports. Cost-benefit analysis, financial cost. For the outsourcing, there will be positive cash flow for financial cost. The successful outsourcing can bring the country incredible resources to help the country. to raise the concerns of the improving climate change and the broadcast the value of the UNFCCC. Schools in Colombia are encouraged to offer courses and activities about climate change. Setting an example for another developing countries would encourage those countries to follow in our footsteps, help put in place similar policies to reduce emissions and deforestation. The successful outsourcing can bring Colombia positive social impact like the technique, the political, health, and the education. Providing healthy care plans to citizens will be good for the citizens, but they might not be able to afford the plans. The promotion of the education can give the future generation awareness about the climate change. People will actually consider their action relative to the climate change. Addressing concerns of vulnerable groups. These recommendations take into account that women are the primary populations and put the focus on them to help educate them, improve the living conditions, and allow them to have the access to local food and water. Indigenous people, having the governments provide living policy and the indigenous people's living traditions and the environment can be helped and improved on. Poor population. Successful outsourcing can give a Colombia government help benefit and allow the government to provide the poor population with a better health conditions and living condition.
Paris looked lovely, but it looks like we're actually running out of time. Anything else you want to add?
As you can see, the Colombia is at high risk from climate change impact. One of the most vulnerable countries in the world, Colombia suffering the extreme weather like flood, heavy rain, and the sea level rising, and more. Lots of people are the victim of the climate change, like poor population, women, indigenous people, and unborn baby. Colombia government is currently trying to mitigate and adapt to the climate change. The Colombia government is working hard to cooperate with UNFCCC, so they will contribute their effort to the global target. And we suggest Colombia outsourcing the resource, promote the education, and try to focus more attention on the human health and the human living problem.
Thanks, for that summary. Well, that's all we have for today. Thank you for watching CPS and have a great day.